Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are going to cover instructional models and programs today. We are in Chapter 5 of Foundations for Teaching English Language Learners by Wayne E. Wright. So let's get started. The first guiding question: what are the essential components of any instructional models and programs for English learners? So language and education policies for English learners are determined at the district, school, and classroom levels through a variety of instructional programs. As we discussed in the last session, decisions are based on federal and state policy, as well as research and the characteristics of the students and the community. So all teachers are responsible for developing the knowledge and skills they need to educate themselves about English learners in their classes. So that is why this class exists. An understanding of the range of instructional programs for linguistically and culturally diverse learners, including ELLs, is an important part of that knowledge base. And as is anything with working with humans, there is no one-size-fits-all program that is appropriate for all students in all schools. So the essential components of instructional programs for English learners include English as a second language instruction, or we say ESL instruction, content area instruction, and bilingual strategies. So let's first talk about English as a second language. So this instruction is identified as ESL. In other states, it is called ELD. In Pennsylvania, we're moving towards calling it English Language Development, or ELD. There are also some acronyms such as English for Speakers of Other Languages, ESOL, English as a New Language, or ENL, and English as an Additional Language. So this draws to mind that students are learning sometimes their third, fourth, or even more languages. So these labels are more accurate. So ESL is a separate content area with its own set of curricular materials, separate time slot in the day, and standards. So these standards have been mandated by ESSA. In Pennsylvania, we call our standards English Language Development, or ELD standards. The purpose of ESL instruction is to enable English learners to develop their proficiency in English by mastering the skills of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and to use English appropriately and authentically in communication, as well as to achieve academic success in the mainstream classroom, whether it be elementary, middle, or secondary. So many schools make the mistake of providing daily ESL instruction only to beginning learners. So students who are new, who are entering the school in the beginning of learning language. So anywhere in the WIDA score between 1 and 2.5. Once the student reaches the intermediate level, typically ESL support is pulled from those students, and students are returned to their mainstream classrooms. So this is a mistake because it's based on the false assumption that students no longer need ESL because they have developed fluency in English, but we know that they're going to need more support. So some data shows us that beginning level ELLs move up to the intermediate level within 2 to 3 years, but then the majority of them get stuck at the intermediate and advanced levels, often for several years. And that can turn into a situation where the student is labeled a long-term English learner. Another study, which I think is very interesting, showed that only 65% of English learners in cohorts of kindergarten, third, and sixth grade students attained English proficiency within a 6-year period. So the study found that less than half of the students moved up at the rate of 1 English proficiency level per year. So we're always pushing our students in their process of learning English and second language acquisition. So I love seeing this data that supports us, that says students need time, 6-year period. So these studies reveal that all English learners, including those at the intermediate and advanced levels, need consistent high-quality ESL instruction to reach that level of proficiency. ESL instruction at the intermediate and advanced level should provide more emphasis on increasing vocabulary and developing skills in advanced literacy. So many teachers report that English learners at these higher levels have strong oral skills, listening and speaking. Sometimes they're referred to as native English speakers because they sound fluent and they have reading fluency when reading text aloud. The problem is that English learners often do not fully comprehend what they're reading because they're still developing those high-level vocabulary and more knowledge of complex sentence structures. So they might not have enough background knowledge to understand the cultural references in a text or understand the more subtle uses of language and how language differs for social and academic purposes. These same issues can lead to difficulties when students are writing in English. So we'll be talking about this more in future classes, but writing is typically the most difficult proficiency to meet for English learners. And ESL at the intermediate and advanced levels focus on all of these areas. So content area instruction is the second essential component of every program for English learners. So the most effective way to make content comprehensible is to teach in the students' home languages. Effective content area instruction in English learners' home languages requires certified bilingual teachers who are fully proficient in both the native language or the home language and in English. It also requires appropriate curriculum materials in the students' home languages. So thinking about the context of Pittsburgh, you can imagine we're going through a teacher shortage in general across the country. So think about how difficult it is to find certified bilingual teachers in students' home languages, as well as curricular materials in home languages. When home language instruction is not possible, teachers use sheltered English instruction. So sheltered English instruction refers to grade level content area instruction that's provided in English, but in a manner that is comprehensible to our English learners while promoting their English language development. The word sheltered is a metaphor for simplifying the language without watering down the content. So we're protecting ELLs from language demands that may be beyond their comprehension. So we're given this model to use. It's called the SIOP model, which is Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. And it offers guidance to teachers who use sheltered instruction by helping them to systematically plan, teach, observe, and evaluate effective instruction for ELLs. So let's talk about SIOP. SIOP is a model of sheltered instruction designed to make grade level academic content understandable for English learners, while at the same time developing their academic English language proficiency. So the most important part about SIOP is that content and language objectives are both present and intertwined in all lessons. So this feature highlights the fact that content area teachers, in addition to ESL teachers, have the responsibility for helping English learners develop proficiency in English, particularly in the discipline-specific ways used in the content area. So this model is field tested, and there's some research of validity and reliability as an observation protocol, and it is an effective pedagogical approach. So it has 30 features and 8 main components that we're going to go over today. The 8 components are lesson preparation, building background, comprehensible input, strategies, interaction, practice and application, lesson delivery, and review and assessment. So let's talk first about lesson preparation. Teachers use SIOP to help students meet standards and prepare learners for college and future careers. So in lesson preparation, it's essential that teachers establish clear objectives, appropriate concepts, supplementary materials, adapted content, and meaningful activities. And you will see in your course notes that these links will provide you with a video for each component of SIOP. So you're able to click on that link and watch information about lesson preparation. Building background, we link to students' rich, diverse cultural backgrounds and talk about what they've experienced and what they know. We tap into their prior knowledge about a topic, and we also pre-teach key vocabulary that will help the students be successful in the lesson. When thinking about comprehensible input, we are aware of the appropriate level of speech. We are using clearly explained text, and we're using a variety of techniques to reach the learners. In strategies, we're using explicit teaching strategies as well as learner strategies, providing multiple opportunities for students to use material and have conversations. We're using many different questioning types and really focused on how to scaffold each lesson for our differing levels of English learners. When looking at interaction, we're making as many interactive opportunities for students as possible. We're grouping them strategically. So maybe they're working with their same language peers. Maybe they're working with a peer that has a different language than them so that they're practicing English. We're thinking about the level of oral language versus literacy level when we're grouping students. We're giving them sufficient wait time and also clarifying concepts in their first language. When we look at practice and application, it is the I do, we do, you do method. So we want students to be able to practice we do over and over and over again before they're asked to do it independently. We incorporate objectives, hands-on materials, and we use many visuals in the SIOP model. When looking at lesson delivery, we support those objectives, content and language objectives. We are consistently engaging the students, and we're making sure that we are pacing this appropriately. In review and assessment, we look at vocabulary and concepts in our review. We provide feedback to the students in conferences and written feedback, and we also assess comprehension of all of the objectives. So the SIOP model has become very popular with school districts, encouraging teachers and administrators to receive SIOP training. So a concern is that some administrators see the SIOP training for teachers as sufficient to address all English learners' needs. So research has shown that SIOP training alone is insufficient to prepare teachers to work effectively with ELLs. Professional development and second language teaching, learning, and assessment, as well as understanding sociocultural, historical, economic, and political factors that can affect English learners and academic content learning, provide the foundation for effective sheltered instruction in the classroom. So it's not just the SIOP model alone that creates a successful environment for English learners. Educators also need to understand how sheltered instruction fits into their overall instructional program for ELLs, whether it be a bilingual model or an English medium model. So now let's look at bilingual strategies. The third essential component of instructional programs is bilingual strategies. New developments in the field of bilingualism in education challenge educators to shift their perspective on the ways multilinguals use languages to learn. From a sociocultural perspective, the dynamic language practices of multilinguals can be referred to as translanguaging. So teachers use bilingual or translanguaging strategies to leverage students' bilingualism for learning in any context. This perspective on bilingualism in education also sees language as a resource to develop, but does not see the home language as a scaffold or support to be removed when English learners no longer need it. So instead, it sees multilingualism holistically, with bilinguals drawing on their languages and in their linguistic repertoire to make meaning, even when using one language exclusively, such as English, rather than another, such as Spanish. So teachers do not need to speak the home languages of their students to facilitate effective use of translanguaging within different bilingual and English medium program models. So the next guiding question, what is the difference between English as a second language and sheltered instruction? So educators are often confused about the differences. Let's just be very clear and say the focus of ESL is teaching English, and the focus of sheltered instruction is teaching academic content. So to give this to you in a classroom view, let's look at the example of a teacher teaching long division in a co-taught classroom with a content area teacher and an ESL teacher. So the content area here is math, and the ESL teacher is here to support language. So the sheltered instruction lesson and the ESL lesson both include the content and language objectives as SIOP requires, but the two objectives are weighted differently. So for content, the primary instructional and assessment goal of the sheltered instruction lesson involves mastery of long division. The language goals for ELLs are to be able to explain the concept of long division and to write to solve long division problems independently. So there's a bit of a difference. We're looking at very specific language goals for those students to explain and to write. Although the same math standards are addressed for all students, the math instruction and assessments are differentiated for English learners in accordance with their English language proficiency level. So in this context, the ESL teaches the language of math, including vocabulary, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, so that English learners can participate and achieve during the lessons. But the major concern is the content learning. So, in other words, the proper language objectives and scaffolding provide English learners to learn long divisions despite their language level. So, let's talk about the relationship between ESL and English Language Arts, or ELA, because it also causes confusion. ELA standards and instruction are designed for proficient English speaking students to refine skills that they already know. English language proficiency standards and ELA content standards are to be aligned, but are separate. So ELA instruction in the US has traditionally focused on literacy skills, reading and writing, and classroom teachers have typically spent very little time on oral language skills for proficient English speakers. So when we look at curricula, some schools attempt to combine ELA and ESL instruction. Some textbook companies do the same. They produce ELA series that have suggestions in the outer edges of that curriculum to give teachers supplemental materials to meet the needs of English learners. These materials are welcome additions in that they help teachers shelter their English language instruction, but it should not replace ESL instruction. A better approach, which some textbook companies have taken, is to combine a comprehensive ESL program with corresponding sheltered English language arts programs. So our next guiding question is, what are the pros and cons of various bilingual education in English medium models and programs? So there is a wide variety of programs currently in use for English learners that can be classified as bilingual or English medium. A bilingual program is defined as any program in which one or more content areas is taught in the student's home language. In English medium programs, all content areas are taught in English using the sheltered instruction strategies, but this does not mean these programs are English only. Effective English medium programs use bilingual strategies and creative ways to maximize student comprehension and learning. So we're going to talk about 5 different bilingual program models: transitional bilingual education, developmental bilingual education, dual language programs, bilingual immersion programs, and heritage language programs. So bilingual programs now serve English learners and non-English learners. The variation in the ELL category is great and can include students with limited or interrupted formal schooling, refugees, migrants, and adopted children. And the variation in the non-ELL category is also great and can include simultaneous bilinguals, who are students that grow up with 2 languages in their everyday lives, heritage language speakers who are often English dominant with varying abilities in their heritage language, and students from monolingual English speaking homes who want to become bilingual, biliterate, and interculturally competent. So the first bilingual model is the Transitional Bilingual Education Program, or TBE. They're also called early exit programs, and this is the most common type of bilingual program in the US. So TBE programs target English learners who speak the same home language and are mostly implemented in the primary grades. The goal of TBE programs is to transition ELLs to an English medium instruction classroom as quickly as possible. And by providing content area instruction in the student's home language, schools can ensure that students do not fall behind academically while they're learning English. So you can see in the graph on the right that students use the home language in the majority of their day. In kindergarten, grades 1 and 2, by 2, they're using both their home language and English at the same time. About half of their day is spent in these 2 languages. And then as the student progresses into grades 3, 4, 5, and 6, they are mostly or only using English in their instruction. The next model is developmental bilingual education, or DBE, and it's sometimes called maintenance or late entry bilingual education, or one-way dual language bilingual education. DBE programs are much less common than TBE programs in the US because there's a lack of federal funding for this type of model. Like TBE, DBE programs target English learners who speak the same home language, and they're most often found in elementary schools taught by qualified bilingual teachers. So the goals of DBE programs are different. DBE programs aim to help the student develop both English and their home language so that they become fully bilingual and biliterate, achieving academically through both languages and developing a positive sense of cultural heritage and ethno-linguistic identity. So in the graph, you can see on the right, students begin with primarily using that home language and increase in their use of English so that by the end of their elementary experience in grades 4, 5, 6, they're using both languages at about 50% of the day. The term dual language education, according to Howard, refers to any program that provides literacy and content instruction to all students through 2 languages that promotes bilingualism and biliteracy, grade level academic achievement, and sociocultural competence for all students. So based on the student population served, dual language programs are one-way immersion or two-way immersion. One-way immersion programs typically serve students who all speak the same language. One-way immersion programs for English learners who target the home language are best referred to as DBE programs, as we've described earlier. And one-way immersion programs for English speakers are best referred to as bilingual immersion programs. So then two-way programs were originally designed for even numbers of English learners and proficient English speakers. English speakers and English learners in two-way dual language programs spend most of the day together in the classroom where they receive content area instruction in both languages from qualified bilingual teachers. Content area instruction is taught in sheltered English and in a sheltered version of another language, such as Spanish, to make instruction comprehensible for students new to Spanish. Students learn to read and write in both languages, either simultaneously or first in one language, then the other. Teachers are provided daily ESL instruction for their English learners and instruction in the partner language, such as Spanish. What is exciting about two-way dual language models is that theoretically, this puts English learners at equal footing with English-speaking students. When instruction is in the partner language, the English speakers rely on their ELL peers, just as English learners rely on English-speaking peers when the instruction is in English. So this helps the English learners' home language be viewed as a resource by all students. Academic content is accessible in both languages. So it helps to change that view of bilingual education. So it's no longer seen as a remedial program for English learners, but as an enrichment program for all students. So bilingual immersion programs in the United States target English-speaking students exclusively. These programs are called one-way dual language programs. Programs may simply reflect the focus language, such as Spanish immersion or French immersion. The goals are for English speakers to become bilingual and biliterate and to achieve academically in both languages, to develop cross-cultural understanding. So extensive research shows the effectiveness of these programs. And in the US, the bilingual immersion model is commonly implemented with English speakers wishing to learn a high-demand world language. The term heritage language program is used for a wide range of in-school and after-school programs to develop language for students in their heritage language. So a heritage language student can either be an English learner or a student who is proficient in English and may have little to no proficiency in his heritage language, which is common for second or third generation immigrant students. In-school heritage language programs at the elementary school could include any type of bilingual education program described earlier for English learners, or it could simply be a program that provides an hour or so of heritage language instruction during the week as an additional subject. At the secondary level, heritage language programs are typically foreign language classes geared to students whose home languages were spoken. So English medium of instruction, although bilingual education programs are more effective than English medium programs, they're not always feasible. So schools that want to start bilingual programs may be unable to because of a shortage of bilingual teachers or because they have a large number of different language groups. In these instances, high-quality English medium programs are the next best option. In English medium programs, all subjects are taught in English. So English medium does not mean English only. Effective programs provide a combination of sheltered content area instruction, ESL instruction, and bilingual strategies. So let's talk first about pull-out instruction. The goal of ESL instruction is to enable English learners to increase their English language proficiency and ultimately be exited from the program or redesignated as fluent English proficient. Pull-out ESL is a commonly used model, particularly in elementary schools where English learners make up a small population of the total school population. So in this case, learners are spread out across different classrooms, and a certified ESL teacher pulls small groups of English learners out of their regular education classroom into the ESL classroom, typically for 1 to 2 periods a day. The pull-out ESL model has been highly criticized as the least effective model. The problems are that first, students miss out on instruction in their regular education programs when they're pulled. Second, The pull-out model may lead some general education teachers to view English learners as mainly the responsibility of the ESL teacher. Third, many students feel stigmatized after being pulled out day after day from their English-speaking peers. And furthermore, pull-out ESL teachers sometimes find that mainstream teachers are unwilling to collaborate. Pull-out ESL may be more expensive than other models, but because it requires one or more teachers to be hired in addition to regular classroom teachers. And another difficulty is finding space for ESL classrooms in overcrowded schools. So despite these drawbacks, there are some benefits to pull-out ESL. Students are much more active, engaged, and vocal during their ESL time because the ESL teacher creates a safe environment that effectively lowers the filter of English learners. The students enjoy their time in the ESL classroom and develop strong relationships with their ESL teachers. They make greater progress in both language and academic development than they would have without pull-out ESL. And their experiences are positive, supportive in the pull-out ESL classroom that makes their schooling much more enjoyable. So let's talk about in-class ESL instruction. This is provided by the regular classroom teacher. To provide this instruction, classroom teachers must be certified in teaching ESL, and they must also provide an ESL curriculum and instructional materials to the students. A better alternative to pull-out ESL may be push-in ESL, and that means that the ESL teacher goes into the regular classroom to work with the classroom teacher and the English learners. The danger of this model, however, is that the ESL teacher might end up always working in the back of the class or out in the hallway with students, or having to wait while the teacher lectures and then provide assistance afterwards. So in this case, the ESL teacher is treated more like a paraprofessional or educational assistant than a colleague or fellow teacher. For push-in ESL to be effective, the ESL classroom teacher needs to collaborate in a co-teaching model, which means that teachers work together to address content and language objectives of sheltered content area lessons and plan and deliver effective ESL lessons. The ESL teacher can serve as a valuable resource to the classroom teacher, helping the teacher to recognize language demands and upcoming lessons and activities, set appropriate language objectives, and offer advice and demonstrations on how to modify and scaffold work. Through this collaboration, both teachers recognize the shared responsibility for their English learners. So let's talk about sheltered English immersion, sometimes called structured English immersion, which typically refers to self-contained grade level classrooms for English learners with teachers who are trained and certified to provide language and content instruction for English learners. In SEI classrooms, the classroom teacher provides a daily ESL instruction and sheltered content area instruction. In addition, even though all instruction is in English, teachers should purposely use bilingual strategies to help students engage with complex text and learn to use oral and written English for academic purposes. When a bilingual program is not viable, an SEI program is the next best option. So a high-quality SEI program includes daily direct systematic ESL instruction, sheltered content area instruction, and productive use of bilingual strategies. Now let's look at newcomer programs. So newcomer ELLs are best served in bilingual programs, but when these are not available, a newcomer program is the best approach. These programs recognize newly arrived English learners with little to no English proficiency, and that students will have a difficult time where English is the language of instruction. So although there is no one model for newcomers, a comprehensive review of U.S. newcomer programs at the secondary level found that the main goals of newcomer programs include helping students acquire beginning English skills, providing some instruction in the core content areas, guiding students' acculturation to the school system in the United States, and developing or strengthening students' home language literacy skills. Newcomer program classrooms are taught by trained or certified ESL teachers. Bilingual teachers who speak the language of their ELLs are most effective here, and they can use bilingual strategies with their students and to communicate with families. Newcomer programs attempt to provide some sheltered instruction, especially to address literacy and numeracy development with newcomers who have had limited formal schooling. The greatest focus is on providing intensive ESL instruction so students can acquire enough English to participate in an SEI classroom 1 to 2 years later. Some school districts establish separate newcomer schools where the district resources and personnel can be concentrated to meet the students' needs. The last model we'll look at is submersion, which is called sink or swim. So this is one final approach to teaching English learners, which is to do nothing at all. Submersion means placing an English learner in a mainstream classroom where there is no ESL instruction, no sheltered instruction, and no use of bilingual strategies to support the students' learning. Furthermore, the teachers are not certified to teach ESL. Unfortunately, submersion is very common, even though it is a violation of federal law. There are many excellent and experienced mainstream teachers with no training in ESL who regularly have English learners placed in the classrooms and who try their best to meet the needs of students. Our next guiding question: how can educators determine what type of program is appropriate for their context? So ESL and classroom teachers must work collaboratively to engage in co-teaching. As schools turn to co-teaching, teachers are developing innovative ways to collaborate on content and language objectives, lesson planning, lesson delivery, and assessment. ESL specialists are also taking on leadership roles in terms of curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So we now see ESL specialists who are demonstration teachers and coaches who work with general education teachers and sheltered instruction content area teachers. This is challenging, but the collaboration can be accomplished formally through regular meetings before or after school, in grade level teams, or in content area faculty meetings. The ESL teacher could also spend time during planning periods observing content instruction in different classrooms with English learners. The purpose is to share what is being taught in the classroom so that relevant lessons can be provided for English learners and support provided to the classroom teacher. For successful collaboration, teachers need to move beyond the view of my students and your students to our students to make shared commitment to ensuring that all students in school succeed. The appropriate models for a school must be determined by teachers and administrators who work together to study the needs of English learners, what their parents and community would like for them, and the current and potential resources of the school. For example, strong forms of bilingual education may be very feasible in a school with a large number of Spanish-speaking ELLs and less feasible in a school with dozens of different languages, but only a few speakers of each language. Schools should provide the strongest ESL program possible for as many students as possible, and the next best program for those students who such a program is not feasible. The lack of teachers and resources in some languages does not mean bilingual programs are possible. So thank you for your engagement today. In the next class, we will be discussing assessment for English learners. Remember to please contact me whenever you'd like to discuss reading, your thinking, your writing, or any other matter. Thank you so much.